For 2,400 years, people have searched for Atlantis. Explorers have looked in the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, even Antarctica. Psychics claim to channel Atlantean spirits. Documentaries promise they've finally found it. But here's what nobody tells you. We have Plato's original description of Atlantis, word for word, and when you actually read what he wrote, it's not what you think. Atlantis wasn't an advanced utopia. It wasn't destroyed by aliens or earthquakes, and Plato explicitly tells you it's a made-up story. So why do millions of people believe it's real? And why did Plato invent it in the first place? Let's go back to Athens, 360 BC, and uncover what Plato actually wrote, because the truth is way more interesting than the legend. First, let's establish the facts. Atlantis appears in exactly 2 of Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. That's it. No other ancient source mentions it. Not Homer, not Herodotus, not a single historian. And here's what Plato actually says. I'm translating from ancient Greek. Plato writes that his character Critias heard this story from his grandfather, who heard it from Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests 200 years earlier. Already we're playing telephone through 5 generations. According to these priests, Atlantis was an island beyond the Pillars of Hercules. That's the Strait of Gibraltar in the Atlantic Ocean, hence the name. The island was massive, larger than Libya and Asia combined. It had a circular city with alternating rings of water and land walls plated with bronze, tin and orichalcum, a mysterious metal, huge temples with gold statues, advanced irrigation systems, a massive navy and army. And here's the key part everyone ignores. Atlantis wasn't peaceful, they were conquerors. Plato says Atlantis controlled parts of Europe and Africa, and they tried to invade Athens. The Atlanteans were powerful, aggressive and morally corrupt. Then, in a single day and night, earthquakes and floods destroyed Atlantis, and it sank into the ocean. This supposedly happened 9,000 years before Plato's time, around 9,600 BC. That's the story, but here's the problem that destroys the entire Atlantis myth. Plato tells you exactly why he made it up. Plato wasn't a historian, he was a philosopher. And Timaeus and Critias aren't history books, they're philosophical dialogues designed to teach political theory. At the beginning of Timaeus, Plato literally says, and I quote, "Let me tell you a tale which is perfectly true, though it sounds strange." That phrase, perfectly true though it sounds strange, is ancient Greek for this is an allegory. It's like saying once upon a time. It signals that what follows is a teaching story, not journalism. Here's what Plato was actually doing. He was creating an allegory to contrast 2 types of civilization. Ancient Athens, in his story, represents the ideal society. Disciplined warriors, philosophers as rulers, simple, virtuous living, defense, not conquest. Atlantis represents corrupt society, excessive wealth, imperial aggression, moral decay from luxury, materialism over virtue. The moral of the story: virtue defeats corruption. Athens defeats Atlantis. Then the gods destroy Atlantis because they became too wicked. It's literally a pride comes before the fall parable. Plato invented Atlantis the same way Aesop invented talking foxes to teach a lesson. And here's the smoking gun. Plato describes Athens having technology and social structures that didn't exist until his time. He's projecting 4th century BC Athens back 9,000 years. It's clearly fiction. But let's say you still think Atlantis was real. Let's check Plato's timeline. He says Atlantis existed 9,000 years before his time. That's 9,600 BC. Here's the problem. In 9,600 BC, humans were hunter-gatherers. The wheel hadn't been invented. Writing didn't exist. The largest cities had maybe 200 people. Agriculture was just beginning in a few places. Plato describes Atlantis with massive stone architecture, advanced metallurgy, huge naval fleets, complex irrigation, written language and laws. These technologies didn't exist until 3000 to 2000 BC at the earliest. That's 6,000 plus years after Atlantis supposedly sank. And geologically, there's no evidence of a sunken continent in the Atlantic. We've mapped the entire ocean floor. There's no massive landmass that disappeared. Continents don't just sink. Tectonic plates don't work that way. For Atlantis to vanish, you'd need geological processes that would take millions of years, not a single day and night. So the timeline is impossible, the technology is impossible, and the geology is impossible. Which means, if Atlantis is clearly fiction, why do millions of people think it's real? The answer is honestly fascinating. For 2,000 years after Plato, almost nobody took Atlantis literally. Medieval and Renaissance scholars understood it was an allegory. But then in 1882, something changed. A politician named Ignatius Donnelly published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, claiming Atlantis was a real prehistoric civilization that spread culture to Egypt, Mexico, and Peru. Donnelly's evidence was that pyramids exist in both Egypt and Mexico, so they must have learned it from the same source, Atlantis. The problem, Egyptian and Mesoamerican pyramids look completely different, were built thousands of years apart, and served different purposes. But Donnelly's book became a massive bestseller anyway. Then the occult movement jumped on board. Theosophists like Madame Blavatsky claimed Atlanteans were spiritually advanced beings with psychic powers. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, claimed to channel Atlantean knowledge. It got darker. Nazi occultists believed Atlantis was the homeland of a master race. With advanced technology, they literally sent expeditions searching for it. Today, the Atlantis myth has merged with ancient aliens theories, lost civilization conspiracies, and pseudo-archaeology. You can't watch the History Channel without seeing Atlantis finally found. Spoiler, it's never found. So why does it persist? Psychologically, Atlantis fills a need. It suggests ancient people were smarter than we think. It promises hidden knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. It makes history feel more mysterious and exciting. It's more romantic than slow agricultural development over millennia. But here's the thing, the real history is actually way more interesting. While Atlantis itself is fiction, Plato might have been inspired by real disasters. And when you look at the evidence, there's one event that matches his description almost perfectly. Meet Thera, modern-day Santorini. Around 1600 BC, this island exploded in one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. The Thera eruption was 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa. It generated tsunamis 40 feet high. It ejected 24 cubic miles of rock into the air. It destroyed the entire island civilization in hours, and it covered the region in volcanic ash. And here's where it gets interesting. On Thera was a Bronze Age city called Akrotiri. When archaeologists excavated it, they found advanced multi-story buildings, sophisticated plumbing systems, beautiful frescoes showing naval scenes, evidence of trade across the Mediterranean, proof of a wealthy, advanced society. Sound familiar? An advanced island civilization destroyed in a single day by geological catastrophe, sinking beneath the waves. Akrotiri was part of the Minoan civilization, the most advanced culture in Bronze Age Europe. They had massive palaces, indoor plumbing, large navy, trade networks spanning the known world. Writing systems we still can't fully translate. The Thera eruption happened around 1600 BC, about 1,200 years before Plato. That's enough time for the story to become mythologized but still be passed down through Egyptian records. Here's the likely truth. Plato heard legends about Thera and Minoan civilization from Egyptian sources, moved the location to the Atlantic, multiplied the size by 100, pushed the date back 8,000 years, and used it as a framework for his political allegory. So Atlantis isn't real, but the inspiration for it might be. Plato took a real historical disaster and turned it into a teaching parable about hubris and moral decay. So why does this matter? Because the Atlantis myth reveals something important about how misinformation spreads. Plato wrote an obvious allegory, but 2,000 years later, someone misread it as history. That misreading got amplified by occultists, nationalists, and pseudoscientists. Now millions believe it's real. Sound familiar? This is exactly how modern conspiracy theories work. Start with a kernel of truth, the Thera eruption. Add speculation, maybe it's the real Atlantis. Remove context, ignore that Plato said it's allegory. Amplify through believers, books, documentaries, YouTube. Becomes common knowledge, despite zero evidence. This is why reading primary sources matters. When you actually read what Plato wrote in context, with historical knowledge, the mystery evaporates. Atlantis is a philosophy lesson, not a lost continent. And honestly, the real ancient world is way more impressive than Atlantis ever was. Göbekli Tepe, the Antikythera mechanism, the pyramids, these are real, impossible-seeming accomplishments. We don't need to invent fake civilizations when actual history is this incredible. So here's the bottom line. Atlantis is not a historical mystery. It's a solved philosophical allegory that got out of control. Plato created a fictional civilization to teach a lesson about the dangers of imperialism and moral corruption. That's it. He never claimed it was real. His students never claimed it was real. No ancient historian ever looked for it. Every hour spent searching for Atlantis is an hour not spent studying actual ancient civilizations that really existed and really accomplished incredible things. But if you want a real Atlantis, study Akrotiri and Minoan civilization. They actually existed. They actually had advanced technology for their time. And they actually were destroyed in a catastrophic disaster. That's the real story the documentaries won't tell you. If you want more history myths debunked, subscribe for new videos every Monday and Thursday. And let me know in the comments, what other famous mysteries should I investigate? Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the conspiracy is that there is no conspiracy.